They say your whole world changes the moment you become a mother. Mine did too, but not for the reasons I expected. Because the moment my husband Marcus looked at our newborn son for the first time, he didn't cry or smile or even reach for him. He just stared and said, "We need a DNA test immediately." The room fell dead silent. Then, with the most casual smirk, he added, "He's too good looking to be mine." It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. I sat there in my hospital bed, holding our newborn, Liam, just hours after labor, and for a second I couldn't breathe. My arms tightened instinctively around him. His skin was still soft and slightly pink, his tiny fingers curled into a fist near his cheek. He made a little cooing noise, unaware of the silence that followed his father's words. At first I laughed. Because what else do you do when the man you've been married to for 4 years says something so absurd? But no one else really joined in. One of the nurses chuckled awkwardly, more out of discomfort than amusement. My mom, who'd been scrolling through her phone near the window, suddenly stiffened. "Marcus," I said, trying to keep my voice light, "what are you even talking about?" He didn't laugh. He just stood there, arms crossed, looking at Liam like he was trying to solve a puzzle. His eyes narrowed slightly, and that stupid smirk never left his face. "I'm just saying," he shrugged. "Those eyes? That hair? That little chin dimple? I mean, come on, there's no way he got all the good genes." I felt my cheeks flush, not from the compliment, but from the implication. My chest tightened, like a rope slowly pulling tighter around my lungs. I tried to laugh again, but it came out thin. "So what, you're serious? You actually want a test?" Marcus walked closer to the bed and leaned down to look at Liam. "Just to be sure," he said, like we were talking about checking the oil in a car, not questioning the paternity of our newborn son. I felt a slow burn crawl up my neck. My hands trembled as I shifted Liam in my arms, cradling him closer to my chest. His warmth was the only thing grounding me in that moment. From the corner of my eye, I saw my mom rise from her chair, arms folded tightly across her chest. Her mouth was pressed into a thin line. She didn't say a word, but I knew exactly what she was thinking. She never trusted Marcus, not fully, and maybe, in that moment, I didn't either. I looked at my husband, the man who held my hand through every appointment, who painted the nursery pale green and told me we'd name our son after his grandfather, and I saw someone else, someone cold, detached, suspicious. "Covering all the bases," he said again with a shrug, like it was no big deal. But it was a big deal, because suddenly everything felt different. The room, the joy, even Liam's soft breathing, it was all undercut by this shadow he had cast. Why did his words hurt so much? Wasn't I enough? Didn't he trust me? I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew one thing. The moment should have been beautiful, and instead it was the beginning of something I never saw coming. After Marcus made that comment, everything shifted. Not just in the room, but inside me. You'd think after giving birth, your only thoughts would be about the baby. Counting fingers and toes, memorizing their little size, falling in love over and over every time they blink. But instead, I couldn't stop thinking about him, Marcus, and what he said. We were discharged 2 days later. My mom insisted on staying with us for a while, to help. But I knew she didn't trust Marcus alone with me. I told her she was being dramatic. She didn't argue. She just gave me that look, tight-lipped, eyes soft with concern. Marcus, on the other hand, acted like everything was normal. He didn't bring up the DNA test again, not once. He changed diapers, made jokes, even took selfies with Liam for Instagram, writing captions like, "Already got my mini-me." I tried to let it go, to convince myself it had been a stupid joke, said at the worst possible moment. But something inside me had started to ache. A quiet, gnawing kind of ache. The kind you can't point to, but you feel in your bones. It wasn't just the comment. It was how he looked at Liam sometimes, like he was trying to figure him out. I caught him one night standing over the crib, just staring. He didn't notice I was watching. His brow was furrowed, eyes squinting a little like he was searching for something he couldn't quite find. When I stepped into the room, he jolted slightly and laughed it off. "Just wondering when he's gonna start looking like me," he said. I smiled, but something about his tone made my skin prickle. Then little things started happening. things I might have ignored if I wasn't already on edge. A nurse from the hospital, Rachel, I think her name was, called one afternoon saying they were doing a routine follow-up. Her voice was polite, but I swear I caught a strange hesitation when she asked for Liam's hospital ID number. I gave it to her, and she paused for a beat before saying everything was fine. I asked her if something was wrong. She said no, but the way she said it didn't sit right. Later that night, I went through Liam's hospital papers and noticed something weird. The wristband they'd clipped on him at birth, one of the numbers was off from mine. Just one digit. A typo, maybe. But once you start doubting, you can't stop. I Googled newborn ID errors for hours. I fell down a rabbit hole I never meant to find. I finally showed Marcus. "Are you serious right now?" he said, laughing. "You were the one mad at me for even suggesting something was off, and now you're acting like the baby might not be ours." I opened my mouth to argue, but he kept going. "Sophie, you're tired. You just had a baby. Your hormones are all over the place. Don't let this get in your head." He kissed my forehead and walked away, leaving me standing there with a handful of medical papers and a head full of doubt. Maybe he was right. But if everything was fine, why couldn't I shake the feeling that something wasn't? I started checking things obsessively: his birth certificate, the bracelet, old ultrasound records, photos. I became someone I didn't recognize, a mother with a newborn in one arm and a browser history full of worst-case scenarios in the other. I didn't want to believe Marcus was serious about the test, but now, deep down, I wasn't so sure he was wrong to ask, and that terrified me. It was a few days later when Marcus brought it up again. He didn't do it during a fight or even with a hint of anger. He just said it casually, over coffee, like he was mentioning a dentist appointment. "So, I found a private clinic that does same-day DNA testing," he said, taking a sip from his mug. "Discreet, reliable." I blinked at him, unsure if I'd heard correctly. "You're still on that?" He looked up. His eyes were calm, but too calm. Controlled. "I think it'll just give us both peace of mind." Both? I didn't answer right away. I stared down at Liam, who was curled up on my chest, his tiny lips twitching in a dream. He was so peaceful, so perfect. The idea that anyone would question him, even his own father, felt like an insult. But at the same time, I had been questioning things too, hadn't I? The wrong ID number, the nurse's weird tone, the way Marcus stared at him in the dark like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "I thought you said you were joking," I whispered, still staring at Liam. Marcus shrugged. "Half joking, but seriously, Soph, wouldn't it help you too? You've been acting different, anxious." He wasn't wrong, but something in his tone felt off, not concerned, strategic, like he already had a narrative and was waiting for me to catch up. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept watching Marcus out of the corner of my eye. Not because I thought he'd hurt Liam, but because I realized I didn't really know him anymore, or maybe I never did. The next morning, I called the hospital. I told them I had a few questions about Liam's birth records. The woman I spoke to transferred me to someone else and then someone else again. Finally, I was put through to a hospital administrator named Ellen, who seemed cautious. "Everything looks fine on our end," she said after a pause. "Healthy baby boy born at 3:42 a.m., no complications." "But his bracelet didn't match mine," I said, "just one digit off." "That can happen," she replied quickly, too quickly. "We've updated our labeling system since then." Before I could ask more, she cut me off. "You should speak to patient records if you want printed documentation." Click. I sat there for a long time with the phone still in my hand. It was like everyone wanted this to disappear, like if they ignored it long enough, it would. That same day, I went digging through Marcus's old stuff, his documents, high school yearbooks, anything I could find. I told myself I was just curious, but deep down, I was looking for something to either confirm my fear or erase it. But there were gaps. No baby photos, no childhood mementos, just a few adult IDs and his college diploma, which I realized didn't even list a middle name. I'd never noticed that before, or maybe I never questioned it. When I asked him about it later, he laughed. "Fire burned all that stuff when I was a kid, remember? I told you that." "Had he?" I couldn't remember. Every little inconsistency suddenly felt like a thread, and once you start pulling, it's hard to stop. Still, I agreed to the DNA test, not because I believed Liam wasn't ours, but because I needed proof. Not of Liam's identity, but of Marcus's. I didn't say that out loud, of course. I just nodded and said, "Okay." And the minute I did, Marcus exhaled, relieved. That was the moment I realized. He wasn't afraid of what we might find out. He was afraid I'd stop asking. The DNA test was scheduled for Thursday. Marcus handled everything, called the clinic, filled out the forms, even drove us there like it was some normal family errand. He was calm, too calm. Meanwhile, I felt like my chest was lined with barbed wire, tightening every time I looked at him. Liam was in his car seat in the back, blinking up at the ceiling, kicking his tiny socks off again. He was the only one in the car who seemed at peace. I envied him. We dropped off the samples, mine, Marcus's, Liam's, and were told we'd get results in 5 business days. Marcus joked on the way out, something like, "Bet he's 80% angel, 20% trouble," but I barely heard him. My thoughts were already spiraling. 5 days to sit in this limbo, knowing my husband thought our son might not be his, and knowing I didn't really know who he was anymore. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid in bed pretending to scroll my phone while Marcus dozed off beside me. But my mind wouldn't quiet down. His fire story about losing childhood mementos kept looping through my head. It felt rehearsed, convenient. Why couldn't I remember him ever telling it before? The next morning, I dropped Liam off with my mom and went back to the hospital on my own. I told them I'd left behind a small blanket with Liam's name embroidered on it. Total lie, but it got me past the front desk and into maternity. The moment I saw Nurse Rachel, the one who had looked uneasy after the birth, I felt a jolt of hope and dread. She recognized me immediately. "Sophie, right?" she said, offering a soft smile. "How's the little guy?" "Good," I said. "But I have a weird question." I told her about the mismatched bracelet, the wrong digit, the follow-up call. I expected her to brush it off, but instead, her face went pale. I shouldn't say anything, she said, glancing around. But that night, we did flag a potential mismatch, just for a moment. Something in the system glitched and showed 2 babies under your ID number, but it was cleared. Management said it was a system error and told us to move on. I felt the blood drain from my face. Was Liam ever taken out of the room without me? I asked. Rachel hesitated. For a routine check, yes, but only briefly. How long is briefly? She didn't answer. I thanked her, numb, and left the hospital in a fog. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. My throat was dry. The words, "2 babies under your ID," echoed in my head like a siren. I couldn't tell Marcus what I'd learned. Not yet. I needed more. So I started digging. Social media, online archives, anything I could find about Marcus's past. I even searched public record databases, which I'd never thought I'd do in my life. It was like I had become a detective in my own marriage. But the more I looked, the more the details blurred. No trace of his high school graduation, no tagged photos before 2012, and oddly, I couldn't find a single person online who shared a memory of him before college, not even a childhood friend. It was like Marcus had been born at 21. I stared at a blank profile photo from an old college alumni page and felt my stomach twist. I had agreed to a DNA test to prove Liam was ours, but now I wasn't sure what scared me more. The possibility that our son wasn't his, or the growing fear that Marcus wasn't who he claimed to be at all. The call came early on a Wednesday morning. I was standing in the kitchen, rocking Liam in one arm, still in my pajamas, when my phone rang. The screen just said, "Unknown number." I almost didn't answer. Something in me froze, but I picked up. "Mrs. Evans?" A calm, clipped voice said, "This is Dr. Graham from Greenbrook Medical. We need you and your husband to come in today to discuss the results of your paternity test, in person." "In person?" I asked, my throat going dry. "Yes, it's urgent." My stomach dropped. I couldn't even speak. I just nodded as if he could see me. Marcus didn't ask questions when I told him. He just said, "Finally," and grabbed his keys. The drive to the clinic was quiet. Liam was asleep in his car seat again, completely unaware of the storm swirling around him. I stared out the window, heart pounding, trying to steady my breathing. At the clinic, a nurse led us to a small private office. It was cold inside, sterile, like they'd sucked the warmth out on purpose. A digital clock on the wall ticked loudly, every second hammering against my nerves. Then Dr. Graham walked in. He was middle-aged, graying at the temples, with a no-nonsense air about him. He sat across from us, opened a file, and paused, long enough that I felt my chest physically tighten. "I'm going to be direct," he said. "The results came back, and they are highly unusual." I clutched Liam tighter, suddenly aware of how warm and real he felt in my arms, my anchor. Dr. Graham looked at me first. "Sophie, biologically, this child is not related to Marcus." I didn't even blink. Somewhere inside, I already knew that. But then he turned to Marcus. His eyes lingered for a second too long. Something passed across his face. Hesitation. Maybe even fear. "And Marcus," he continued, voice quieter now, "you are not a biological match for this child. But more importantly, your DNA doesn't match any records associated with the ID you submitted." Marcus went still. I looked over at him, expecting confusion, denial, something. But his face didn't move. Not even a twitch. Dr. Graham closed the folder. We ran a cross-check through our internal system. Your name, your date of birth, even your photo, all of it triggered a federal alert. I felt my blood run cold. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Graham didn't answer. He picked up the phone on his desk, pressed a button, and said one sentence I'll never forget. "Security. We need you in room 4 immediately." Time stopped. I turned slowly toward Marcus, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw it. The tiniest flicker in his eyes. Panic, but just for a second. Then it was gone. "What the hell is going on?" I breathed. Marcus stood. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "You think I'm some kind of, con artist?" But Dr. Graham didn't flinch. "We don't think. We know. Your DNA matched a man named David Langston. Arrested in 2014. Disappeared shortly after posting bail. The real Marcus Evans died in a car accident the following year. We're not sure how long you've been living under his name." I couldn't breathe. The room spun. The man I married, the father of my child, the man I thought I loved, wasn't even real. As 2 uniformed guards entered the room, David, looked at me. Not with guilt, not with regret, but with sadness. Like maybe, for a moment, he'd actually wanted to be someone else. And just like that, they took him away. Out of my life. Out of Liam's. Out of the lie we were living. I didn't cry right away. Not when they handcuffed him. Not when the door slammed behind him. Not even when Dr. Graham handed me the printed DNA results like some final confirmation that none of this had been a dream. I just sat there, numb, holding Liam close to my chest, his tiny head resting under my chin like he was the only real thing left in the world. The days after felt like walking through water. Everything slowed down. Everything felt heavy. Reporters tried to reach out once the story hit local news. A man living under a stolen identity, posing as a husband, a father. They called it a bizarre paternity case with a criminal twist. I hated that phrase. This wasn't a story. This was my life. It turned out David, Marcus, whatever his real name even was, had been switching identities for years, avoiding debt, legal charges, even rumors of fraud in another state. He wasn't a violent man. At least not physically, but the betrayal cut deeper than any bruise ever could. What kind of person fakes their entire life just to be with someone? And worse, what kind of person becomes a father in the middle of that lie? For a while, I couldn't stop blaming myself. I went through every memory with him, every birthday, every laugh, every "I love you," trying to find the cracks, the clues, the signs I missed. But the truth is, people like him, they're good at pretending, good at becoming exactly who you need them to be. But here's what shook me the most. Liam was mine. I had feared the worst, that he'd been switched, that I'd somehow gone home with the wrong baby. But after the investigation, the hospital confirmed what Nurse Rachel had tried to tell me. There had been a system glitch, a mix-up, but it was corrected before we were discharged. Liam never left my side long enough to be taken. He was mine from the moment he took his first breath. And yet, in some twisted way, David had used that glitch to his advantage. He fed the doubt, leaned into the confusion, made me question everything so I wouldn't start questioning him. Clever, cruel, calculated. It took me weeks to say his name out loud, even longer to stop calling him Marcus in my own thoughts. Now it's just me and Liam. We moved back in with my mom for a while, Angela, who never once said, "I told you so." She just held me when I finally let myself cry, and she holds Liam like he's the whole world because to me, he is. I filed for annulment. There were no legal complications, surprisingly. You can't stay married to someone who never existed. Sometimes I still get mail addressed to Marcus. I toss it in the trash without opening it. And other times, late at night when Liam's asleep and the house is quiet, I think about the man I thought I loved. The version of him that sat with me at 3 a.m. feedings, who painted the nursery pale green, who kissed my forehead before every doctor's appointment. Was that real? Or was that just part of the lie too? I don't know. Maybe I never will. But I do know this. Sometimes, the truth doesn't just hurt, it rips the ground out from under you. It forces you to rebuild everything from scratch, to figure out who you are without the person you thought would be by your side. And in that messy, painful rebuilding, you find something stronger. You find yourself. And in my case, I found Liam. And that's more than enough. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever found yourself questioning everything, your relationships, your reality, even your own instincts, just know you're not alone. Sometimes the hardest truths lead us to the strongest versions of ourselves. If this story moved you, made you feel something, or reminded you to trust your gut, please give it a like, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real, raw, and powerful stories like this one. Your support means more than you know, and who knows, maybe the next story you hear will be the one you needed most. Until next time, take care of your heart and trust it too.